Hey, how's it going? Brian here, and I'm super excited to have a friend and a former client, actually, of eCom Underground, Amika Coleman. She is the founder of Strands of Faith. Strands of Faith is a clean and conscious beauty brand that formulates cruelty-free products, hair care products for textured hair. She's had an amazing journey. I feel like honored that I was a part of that, and I got to see her transform, not just her business, but I got to see her transform. And I think that's a big thing I want to talk about today, and let her just share her story, because I think it's something that a lot of you are probably going through. You know, as you grow your business, you're going to have to become someone else who can step into the role of the leader of that new business. So I know Amika's gone through that, and at the same time, she's an amazing mom, an amazing wife, and has kept her spirits high during lows, and she's done it all. She's amazing. So Amika, thank you so much for being here.
And thanks for having me.
So I think one thing we can just start out with right away, I actually would love to know, Strands of Faith, the brand has gone through a lot of transformation and everything. We'll talk about kind of the history, but I was always curious, like, where did the idea come from? I think that some people are listening and maybe don't know like what to sell. Maybe they're at that stage. So, was this your first ecom brand? And, where did the idea come from to go into this space and to start this brand?
Yeah. So yes, this is my very first ecom brand. As far as like selling hair products, I naturally had a passion for natural hair and encouraging, women to embrace the hair, to just feel good about their hair, not feel like they had to succumb to certain beauty standards or whatever. And so I wanted to create clean products that didn't have any like chemicals and the fillers and all the nasties in it, and that was going to actually moisturize and like hydrate like my kind of hair, my kinky texture type of hair. So I like to call it passion meeting purpose, because
Passion meeting purpose.
yes,
Got it.
meaning purpose. Yeah. Leading up to this, like my past career, my past education was preparing me for the moment to launch my brand. But in hindsight, I see it now. At the time, I didn't know it. So that's why I call it passion meaning purpose, because when I started it, I had to take the leap of faith, I hadn't done this before. It was new to me, but I just, when I took the leap, things just kind of start falling into place. But to answer your question, this is my first brand. I wanted to cater to I guess a niche that was like genuine and natural to me, something that I
Yeah.
knew that I can bring to the market that was like a solution and that I really understood. So
And I think that early on, and when did you start the brand, by the way?
2018.
So 2018, I know we met and you ended up coming into the program in the intensive. It was like end of 2019. It was right as 2020 was starting.
Right.
We'll talk a little bit about that. But one of the things that stood out to me right away is that, and I think this is probably good advice for people, is you understood the product, you understood, and this isn't a requirement. I know plenty of people who know nothing about home decor, but they find an opportunity and they're able to grow a brand. So please, if you're listening to this or watching this, I'm not saying that's a requirement, but it was an advantage for you, right? Because that was part of your marketing early on. I noticed when you first came to us, like the stuff that was really working was like you doing your daughter's hair it's like it was something you related to and you knew your audience really well. Like you knew how to communicate to them, right?
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So I think there's an advantage to that. It's not a requirement, but I think that there's definitely an advantage and it's something you're interested in. That's something that stood out to me right away when I first heard about the brand and we were looking at all the stuff that was working.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, would you say that, I mean, I don't think it's a requirement, but what do you think? Do you think that's something that it's pretty important?
It's so funny you asked that, because now I think whenever you start something, it's probably in your best interest to start with something that's true to you, because when the going gets tough, it gives you that grit and that willpower to stay in it. Because if you're in something just for money, you're gonna fall out very quick. You're not gonna stay with it for too long or have that like willpower to stick it out. But now that I've learned with this business, I can confidently say that I could probably launch a business in a niche unrelated to something that I'm passionate about, because the framework is almost the same. Once you learn and understand it, you can go and kind of replicate it to another industry or whatever. So I would encourage people to start with something that they're passionate about and then kind of advance or spread out, expand from there.
Yeah, that's a great insight. That's really good. It's really good insight, right? Is like during the highs, anybody can do it, right? But when the going gets tough, when you hit the lows, and you have to think creatively, you have to have the motivation to get up and to push. It really does help, right? If it's something you can do that you actually are interested in.
Right.
Now, it's interesting you mentioned. I was just having a conversation with my buddy about this, where there's some statistic. I don't know what it is. I'm not even going to try to quote it, but there's some statistic that the average millionaire or successful person, however you want to define it, or however it's defined in the research, that if you took everything away from them, they would get it all back and more within 18 months or something. It's something like that. And we were talking about why is that? Because I know it's some things I've thought about. And I think part of it is that you know how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But how much do you think is a part of like who you've become now? Like your self-image,
Oh my gosh. 1,000,000,000,000%. Let me tell you, it's funny because I was talking to a friend too, and I was like, business, like becoming a business owner, starting your own business, grows you up quickly, like mentally, spiritually, in all areas, emotionally. Like who I was when I started in 2018 is a completely different person than who I am now. And I had to challenge myself to break down limiting beliefs that I had along the way. I just had to rebuild myself. It was essential to arrive to where I am, and who I am today will be different at the next level, so I think it has everything to do with success, honestly. Like you cannot start where you are mentally and scale to the next level without changing your mindset or becoming a different person. Like I don't
Yeah.
possibly.
Any advice, like if you had to boil that down to what has helped you, any advice that you would give, to somebody who's going to have, we're all going through that process, but
Right.
things that have helped you go through that process?
I would say be intentional about failing. And I know that's probably like, what? Be intentional about failing. Like that's something you should avoid. But I learned early on that you cannot reach success without failing. Like every attempt that you go through, whether it's launching a new product or trying a new marketing angle, you have to try it in order to reach success. It's kind of like, I guess, split testing in life, as marketers, you understand split testing. Like you have to try something to see, because in your mind, initially you may think, oh, this is going to work. And you put it out there and then the market tell you, okay, this is not, it,
Nope.
So, and in that, one had to fail in order to find a success, So I would say, don't be afraid of failure. You have to do it afraid. Failure is a part of it. So welcome it. Like when I started welcoming it and started like separating the fact that this failure, it doesn't define me as a person. Like it's apart from me.
That's
Like
huge.
yes, when you think about it in that way, you can fail more often because it doesn't define you. And I think early on, that mindset change is different, because I would have soaked in that and let it define me. Like, okay, I'm a failure. I didn't do this right. And mentally, that can take a lot on you. It prevents you from taking the next step or trying something new. So once you can separate the two, that's going to be huge. And welcome failure. It's needed to get to the next level with success. And I would say that's the biggest thing. Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was on a coaching call once, and this is a lot of times on coaching calls, you're just feeling the other person and like trying, I at least try not to have like, define like set answers. I try to really be present in the situation, the other person, and how I even deliver it. And I remember I said this, it's kind of what you're saying is when you test something, when you put a product out there, it's important to remember that people are saying no to your product. They're not saying no to you, because it feels like your baby, right? Like they're saying no to you because this is like a reflection of you. This baby has half of your genetic,
Right.
your DNA. So if they're like, oh, your baby is okay, you're like, it's personal, but
Exactly.
if they say no to your headline or no to your first product or whatever, no to your first 10 products, like they're not saying no to you.
Yeah.
It's they're just saying no to a product, you know?
Right. And I remember, it's so funny. I don't know if you remember this, but I remember one time coming to you and I was saying about the comments that I would receive on pictures of my ads of people saying, oh, that's fake hair, that's a wig, that's this,
Yeah.
that's that, or this is a scam. And I used to take those comments to heart
Like,
because I thought it was an attack on me. And then I had to realize, okay, these people are sitting behind a computer. They don't know me as a person. So don't internalize that. And so now I'm much better at being able to see it at face value and be like, okay, and I educate instead of automatically taking offense, you know?
yeah, that's awesome. I think it's a huge insight. And I think it's something that prevents a lot of people from even, never mind testing and trying to move the ball forward. I think it prevents a lot of people from even going to the starting line and even running the race, right? It's a lot of self-conscious stuff.
Right.
So yeah, forget about it. It's not personal, and you got to be able to fail, and you almost have to embrace the failure to move forward. And success leaves clues. Like you hear this a lot from successful people, right? It's the same. The formula is surprisingly simple. I mean, there are so many common characteristics that have been shared by successful people. So it's interesting to hear it from you and your perspective, but it's stuff that we know this stuff. Sometimes it's hard to internalize and do for ourselves. So I do want to talk about the brand and the growth you've had, because I think it's an extraordinary success story. I know you started with the Faith Shed, which was literally a shed in your backyard, right? Where you would mix the product by hand,
Right.
shelf it, right? So you started in 2018. 2019, I think you did basically around 100K, right? I mean, a little bit more. And then I remember this because I have a screenshot of it. Because I remember for me, I don't know if you know this, it was, I do what I do because I genuinely love helping entrepreneurs grow, and both their business, but grow personally. And I remember when you asked me, you're like, hey, do you think, because you had done it 100K, do you think we could double that and do 200K in 2021? Now, obviously we didn't know 2021 was going to be the year that it was going to be.
2020.
Was it? Oh, 2020. Sorry, 2020. Right. Because obviously, e-commerce went through a massive shift during 2020 with all the shutdowns. But 2020, I remember this. And I remember feeling like, heck yeah, I know you're going to be able to do that. And I think you'll be able to do way more. And I really did. In my mind, I thought, I really think you can hit, 7 figures. And sure enough, right, through 2021, you actually did cross the $1 million mark for the year, didn't you?
Yes, we did. So that was a huge milestone, definitely unexpected. So I started that year. I still remember I had it on my little vision card. I wanted to do a revenue goal of 225,000 for the year. And I guess God said, no, bigger, and 5 times that, which was 10x, about 10x previous year. So it was amazing.
Yeah. And I don't want to gloss over that. You have always been very good and intentional about setting goals. It's something that you write them down, right?
Right.
I remember you would take screenshots and send it to me of things you had written. It wasn't just you typing it out. It was a written, target.
I remember sending that sticky to you, that exact sticky. Now that I think about it, yep, I sent it to you.
So do you want to talk a little bit about, so I think some people might be interested in that, is, kind of your goal setting process and just, that whole idea?
I really do believe in speaking things into existence as a part of faith. Like you can have God gives us a vision, right? And when he gives us a vision, he gives it to only us, and we're the only person who will be able to see it. But you have to believe in that vision enough to know and have faith that it's going to come to pass. And one way that you do this is you have to write it down. I don't care if you want to, I don't know, if your dream car is a Lamborghini, or if you want a 6-bedroom, 3-bedroom house, you write it down. Revenue goals, write it down. And once you write things down and see it visually, it's something that does in your mental that, when you can visualize something, it's not far from your reach, right? And so that's something I do all the time. I write down goals for myself. And then, of course, you have to put in the work. Faith without works is dead. You have to put in the work, but you can take little steps, piece by piece, to get there. And then before you know it, you've reached your goal, and you're setting new goals. So I do this for like short-term goals, long-term goals, any goal of mine, whether it's business, personal, or whatever. And it just helps me accomplish that goal at a faster rate than I would have if I did not visualize it and write it down.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things where people don't do it. I know sometimes I struggle sometimes to do it. And when I do it, I'm always happy I did. Because I think people think like, well, the future is uncertain. Like, what's the point of setting a goal? Because, you know, something like 2020 could happen and it was good for e-commerce, but it was bad for brick and mortar, right? So
Right.
what's the point of setting a goal? Because I don't know what's going to happen next month, next year, 6 months from now.
Right.
But one of the ways it was explained to me, and there's a lot of, obviously, tons written about goal setting and all of that. But one way it was explained to me, and I think this came from Maxwell Maltz's book, Cybernetics, which is actually like an underground book that a lot of entrepreneurs have read, a lot of big entrepreneurs, and they don't talk about it much, but it's an amazing book. He was basically the precursor to Jim Rohn and Tony Robbins and Zig Ziglar and all those guys. He was back in the 50s and he was a plastic surgeon and he understood this idea of self-image and how it acts as like a governor on what we can accomplish. You know, you can have an engine that's capable of going 200 miles an hour, but if the governor is set at 70, you're never going to go faster than 70, even though you have an engine capable of going 3 times faster. But the governor is your self-image. And what he says, and I thought this was cool, so I'll share it. He said, the mind is like a heat-seeking missile. And if you look at what a heat-seeking missile does is it's finding the heat, right? But what it'll do is it'll go off course and it'll self-correct. And it'll go off course and it'll self-correct. And it'll go off course and it'll self-correct. The whole time it's self-correcting. It's like it goes back to your point, Amika. It needs to fail to know, oh, that's wrong, so it can self-correct. Then it has to go off track so it can self-correct. Then it has to go, boom, then it has to go off, and eventually it finds its target. And what he says is the brain, it wants to solve problems. So you're essentially giving it a problem, quote unquote, to solve. The problem is, I want to make $1 million this year. Okay, so then the brain immediately goes to work. And that's where you get, you'll be in the shower and it's like, oh man, I could do this ad or this, I could reach out to this person. You're on a walk and an idea comes. It's because your mind in the background, it's trying to find that target. But if you don't give it the target, it doesn't know what to do.
It doesn't know what to do. It has no, shooting everywhere. Woo woo, yeah.
So that's awesome that you do set those goals. And I think that's a huge insight that people, I think we know we got to work, we got to get after it, but like, why? What are we doing and what are we aiming at? And look at that. Like you said, okay, you aimed at 225 and hit $1 million. So like, that's good. Now with that came some struggle, and mainly it was the growth, right? There was tons of growth. You went from the faith shed to what do you call the warehouse?
The faith house.
The faith house, right? So you went to the faith shed to the faith house, and there were a lot of challenges, and we don't have to go through every single thing, but I would love to. There's a couple of things I want to touch on here that we talked about. I mean, what were maybe some of the top challenges that you went through just in that growth process, and what advice could you give to people, kind of like even what to expect, just so they know what could be on the horizon?
So with growth, definitely comes challenges as far as making sure that the foundation is where it needs to be so that the system won't, quote unquote, break. I've always kind of been cognizant and aware of this beforehand, before, the growth thing. So I've kind of put things and systems in place to kind of prepare for it. So when it did happen, it wasn't so chaotic and stressful. But some of the ways that I did that, so I was formulating my products initially in my kitchen, right? And then I outgrew the kitchen. And so I was like, I don't want to get a warehouse prematurely. Very cognizant, aware of cash flow. You need to make sure that your margins and everything is good, and before you go out and get a space that you can't afford. So that's what led me to the shed. I was like, okay, I can build a shed in my backyard. So I built a shed in the backyard. The goal again was to be there for 2 years, but I was actually there for 9 months. That's when the growth happened. So I was in a shed that's where I packaged my products and shipped out and all of that. Then fast forward, we got the warehouse or the Faith House in May 2020. That was kind of like the height of where the growth was.
I remember you sending me like, what do you think about this space? What do you think? We were talking
Yeah,
about like leases and everything. It was amazing how fast that happened.
yes, I remember that. But yeah, so when we moved into the Faith House, I was like, okay. At the time, I was like I said, I was formulating the products, I was making the products, I was marketing, I was doing my email marketing, I was doing my social media, customer service, I was doing every single thing you could think of as a solopreneur, one woman show. But I was like, okay, this is not sustainable with growth. You need to have um, people and things in place to kind of like help which each level. So that's when I started hiring. I hired a full-time staff member that I trained to manufacture the product, so we still
Was
manufacture
that
in the house.
was that your first like major hire when you went into the Faith House?
The first hire was shipping.
Shipping? Okay.
Yeah, shipping.
Just to fulfill, because the orders were
For
coming in.
fulfill, right,
Yeah.
exactly, yep. And so, I was still at that time still making the products, but I had someone to help fulfill, and then the second hire was, manufacturing of the products. So yeah, so that helped tremendously on the operation side. It allowed me to kind of pull myself from the hands-on portion of things. And now, my focus is advertising, marketing, and the logistics and keeping things like the glue together. And so since we're still in the growth phase, I have like little like plans and goals to remove myself from each level as time allows. But when you're bootstrapping, you have to know, it's very important to know when to do that and when not to do it. So like I've just been on the ground since the beginning, just putting in the work. And the goal is to eventually, take myself out, but I'm in the trenches for however long I need to be.
Yeah, yeah. And I want to point this out because it stood out to me when we were talking. When you started, you obviously, like everyone who starts out, bootstrap, like you said, solopreneur, you wear all the hats. You do all of it, right? And then I know some of the first hires were probably your, family and stuff, just someone to put stickers on things, right? Like that's a hire, quote unquote. But then you really did start to get help for fulfillment and for all these different hats. And then you had the manufacturing, which you were doing all of it. But early on, I think your strength was pretty obvious. It was the marketing side. It was being able to communicate to your customer, knowing your customer. But you had to wear all these other hats. Then as you kind of were able to start filling those roles, it seems to me, going into 2022, you've gone back into your strength, right? It's allowed you to focus more and more of your time on your strength, which is the marketing, you're right, communicating with your
Right.
customer and probably product development in a way, right? But
Yes.
maybe you could
And
talk
we're in
about
the
that a little
process
bit.
of that as well, product development. Yeah.
Yeah. And then now it allows you to do, this is one thing I'd say is um, it's easy to imitate, but imitators will always fall behind innovators. And it seems that for you now, because you've been able to have more and more of your time, and it sounds like this is the process you're going through, more and more of your time gets focused on the thing you're great at, because you're good at a lot of things, but you're great at the marketing piece. It allows you to now innovate, right? It allows you to think ahead. And we were talking about some strategies, and we won't share them because this is like cutting edge. Like this is actually what you're working on. But you see saturation in your space and certain marketing strategies, and you're like, hey, you're innovating. You're thinking, okay, there's these platforms, but I think there's a new way to do it.
Right.
And now you're going to have the time and the headspace to actually step into that.
Exactly. And I think whenever you're in an industry, there's always going to be people who do things like you, who sell products like you, or have similar businesses as you. But the thing is, nobody's really you, right? Nobody can be you, right? And so, but even outside of that, you have to find ways to innovate yourself. The things that I did in the beginning, I can no longer do. And so that's kind of going back to that whole mindset shift, removing the limiting beliefs and being able to believe that you can innovate and do things new. And so that's where I am now. I'm just like, you know what? I'm not going to box myself. I'm going to try something new. If it fails, it fails. If it takes off, it takes off. Like that's the thing. You want to get to the rocket ship mode. So I'm just going all out, full face forward to do it. So we'll see how it turns out. We'll look back on this and be like, aha, that worked. So
Yeah, right. There's a common theme as I've started on on the show. I used to never do interviews. I used to always just come on, kind of share for a few minutes, some ideas so people could run with them. I started interviewing people. Obviously, I've been fortunate to be in masterminds and things, and being around entrepreneurs and like see the common characteristics. And one of the things that's coming out, especially with e-commerce, as I've started to interview people, is numbers. You've already said it. You're like, know your margin, know the numbers when you're going to grow, because that's going to be stressed. So know those numbers. um, Failing forward. I think the other thing is, like you said, is like innovating, not being afraid to try. And the idea that uh, you test a lot of things, and the one thing that wins, you don't know what it's going to be, but when it does win, it more than covers the cost and the time of all the failures, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's such a big win.
Right.
That's the beauty of business. Is there's a quote in my buddy Alex Hormozy's book, $100 Million Offers, where it's a
Oh, I
Jeff
love that
Bezos
book.
quote, where he says, the thing with baseball is the most runs you can get is 4 runs, but in business, you hit one out of the park, it could be 1,000 runs, it could be 10,000 runs, right?
Right.
And it
Right.
more than pays for the quote unquote failures.
Exactly. 1000% agree.
Yeah. So I want to talk about the things that have changed, right? I mean, there's been challenges. You now have a bigger business, there's bigger space, there's bigger payroll, there's all this stuff. And I know you mentioned like iOS definitely impacted the business. I mean, you guys had to adjust projections. I mean, you're still basically maintaining what you've done through
Right.
2021.
Yeah.
But for 2020, you guys have held that consistent. But one thing that I want to point out is, and you've navigated that and you guys are figuring it out, which is part of business. Just get used to it, right?
Yes.
But I want to point out the email piece, because that was something obviously that we went through in the program and the intensive, and those systems you put in place. But the email really was, you mentioned, that really helped sustain things. You just want to talk about kind of some of those systems and how that worked?
Yeah, so one thing that I really loved about eCom Underground, that piece, the email piece, was phenomenal, because the thing is, like, and a lot of people are realizing now, they're starting to do lead generation and what is it, the first data where they're trying to, accumulate new customers and things like that. But
Yeah, yeah.
email, it gives you the ability to market to your customers over and over and over again, without that initial acquisition cost. And in the program, the way you set up things like having flows, like the welcome series, the abandoned carts, all those things are needed on the back end, to bring in sales without you pretty much on automation, like where you have to do a little bit of nothing. And so having those customers that we already had, and then having the automations in place, kind of sustained and brought in revenue that we didn't have to like work hard for. The main thing we were focused on was front end acquisition. So I would tell any business owner, of course, if you focus mostly on front end acquisition and don't have the back end set up, that is the fastest way to sink. It's
Yeah.
not sustainable. Like, you have to have that balance, and email marketing has been that for us. And I'm just telling you, the things that you help, like the templates you had, and I went in and filled them in and made them like, for my business, they've just
With
been
your
phenomenal.
voice. Yeah.
Yeah, so that has helped tremendously. Of course, now we still focus on email marketing. Since then, I've added SMS text marketing as
Beautiful.
well, which is helpful as well. Just another channel. You want to own your data as much as possible,
Yeah.
and those channels kind of allow you to be able to do that.
Yeah, yeah. I think so. One of the things that the reason I wanted to point this out is because it's a real life example. I've seen it over and over again. Yes, there's going to be peaks and valleys, and business is up and down. What I've seen again, a consistent theme with ecom brands is, and it probably with any business online, but definitely, I mean, I'm in the world of ecom, so that's what I see it the most, is yes, email, it's like an ATM, it's amazing, you don't have to pay acquisition costs. But one of the things that kind of the hidden benefits, every product, this is a little marketing tip, every product has a hidden benefit. You need to find your product's hidden benefit and market that, because your competition probably won't. And there's hidden benefits to strands of faith that you've probably found in terms of culture and community and how it's, you thought you were improving women's hair, but it's also improving how they show up as a mom. It's like, what? Like, right? Like that's like a hidden benefit of your product, right?
Right.
So a hidden benefit of email, yes, it will make you money and that's great, high LTV. It also acts as a like a floor on how bad, quote unquote, things can get, right? Because you've got, things are at a high and it's like, oh my gosh, things are dipping. But like, because you had email, and this happens to a lot of businesses, email like sustains them, right? It's the thing that bridges the gap between the next big thing.
Exactly.
Which is a great comfort to have as an entrepreneur because it's a roller coaster ride. So if we can make the like downs not as fast and as scary.
Right. No, absolutely.
Yeah. Very cool. So, all right. So I want to talk just real quick. I always like to do this. I always like to flip things upside down, and kind of invert the question. So what are, what are things you would say to people like, make sure you don't do this? Sure, there's things you should do, be willing to fail. Make sure you do market your business, all that. But what are things that you would say like, don't do this? These are things to avoid, right? In business. And I think I would love to hear, your thoughts.
The first thing that pops to mind, now this won't apply to everybody, so I'm gonna preface it by saying that speaking specifically to product-based businesses who have a goal in mind to grow, I would say, don't pay yourself too early. Do not take money from the business too early. Then on the flip side, well, it's a balance. I follow a method called Profit First. And
yes,
Profit First.
Great book, by the way. Mike Michalowicz, if you're listening to this, get the book. Amazing for eCom too. But
yes, absolutely love it. So yeah, the flip side of that is you want to kind of take profit first and pay, quote unquote, pay yourself first, as far as like have percentages laid out, just to kind of get in the habit of that when you do grow and you can take bigger percentages or whatever, you have that foundation and the consistency there. But when I say don't pay yourself first, you have some business owners, they start a business, let's just say, they're making, I don't know, a certain amount a year, and now they're taking out that money that they're making.
Yeah, I mean, let's call it, Amika. I already know what you're saying, so let's just call it how it is. You got somebody that's doing $150,000 a year in sales, and paying themselves $100,000, like.
Right, exactly. And it's funny because one of my Facebook friends, he made a post about it, and I commented, and I see it from the lens of a product-based business. I think that's the worst mistake you can make, because if you think about it, if you're taking too much money to pay yourself and you're not reinvesting in the business, it's impossible for the business to grow. Like, it's just not possible for it to grow. And so for me, I was intentional about setting that to the point, like at a space where I was able to do so. So to put things in perspective, in 2018, I was working full time. I was a travel clinical research associate. So I used to travel, around the US and monitor different sites, make sure that, the clinical trials was conducted in accordance to FDA guidelines and all that. So that required me to be away maybe 3 days a week throughout the week, right? And so I'm doing this, and then I'm coming home, still making a product, still packaging, still being a mom, and all of that type of stuff, right? But I knew that first year, it was impossible for me to take money from the business to live if I wanted to grow. So, and then in 2019, after I saw the business getting traction, I was like, okay, this is a sustainable idea. Kind of like what people say, you want to kind of like test the market first, see if it's viable, whatever. So it was viable for me. I said, okay, well, now I'm at the crossroads of, if I want to go to the next level, I have to make a decision. Either I have to pull away from my job, or I have to stay working my job, be stressed out, and be at a cap. So that's when I made the decision to come away. So when I came away, I was able to put more of my time into the business, and as a direct result, I started to see the fruits of my efforts. And so top of 2020 is when I officially put myself, this was 2 years after I started the business, this is when I officially put myself on payroll to have a check. And it's so funny because now that we're talking about this, I was talking to my accountant, and she was suggesting me to kind of like pay myself a little bit more, but I want to pay myself the bare minimum because like I'm very, like I said, when you're bootstrapping and you don't have outside loans, outside capital and all those things, you're very conscious about reinvesting, you know. So I just want to pay myself the bare minimum, but I waited until I was able to do so. So I would definitely say that don't pay yourself too early. Pay yourself, but not too early, too much.
It's such good advice. It's such good advice. I think especially with physical products, because the only way you grow is you have to, if you sold 10 units and made money, unless you want to keep selling 10 units, you have to take money and put it back in so you can sell 20 next time.
20,
And
yes.
unless you want to sell 20 forever, you got to put it back in so you can sell 40 next time. So you
Exactly.
have to keep putting it in to grow.
Right.
And the more that you can put that in, the faster you'll be able to grow. Another thing I would just point out is don't underestimate, and I'm not saying this to you, Amik, I'm saying to listeners, is taxes. I've seen
Yes.
so many of my friends,
Oh my
I've
God.
seen people that they, because you're not, taxes aren't getting taken out of your check. I mean, if you're a W-2 and you're an S Corp and all, that's different. But I'm saying if you're making money, we sold 200 grand and you're not putting taxes away, like that bill comes due and all of a sudden people are like, wait, what? I owe $50,000. And it's like, I don't have that, like, because the money was spent already. So
And
getting into the habit of every dollar that comes in, take,
right.
figure out what your average, what is your effective rate is, it's 27% or 25%. Take that and put 25 cents of every dollar. And actually Mike Michalowicz talks about that in Profit First, is having a
Right.
separate account where you just
Yeah.
put that away, out of sight, out of mind. That's not my money. And don't even look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and to your point, that is absolutely non-negotiable. Like for me, I had a lesson early on. I had someone in my family who was business, and they did not handle their taxes appropriately. So I've seen, where you're behind after year, they would get behind in taxes or whatever. So when I
Always
started,
behind and always paying that other year,
yes,
and
and it's
interest
like
just keeps
a
accruing, and yeah.
hamster in a wheel that keeps turning. And so when I first started in 18, I knew for sure that if I didn't pay anything else, taxes was going to be what I paid for. And so before I even found Profit First, this is before I found Profit First, I would take percentages. I think it was like 30% of revenue and put it in a separate account for taxes, right? And so I practiced that habit. And then when I came across Profit First, they actually have a formula where it makes more sense and you can kind of get a little more accurate. And so, 2020 came and that was a 7-figure year. Okay, you have tens of thousands of dollars of tax bill. Well, I had no worries at all because guess what? I had an account set aside with
It's
this
all
lump
there.
sum in it. I was able to send in that lump sum and not worry about it. Like I don't care how low or whatever's going on in business, I don't take that money as a emergency fund. Like it's not, I look at
Yep.
it, it's not
Nope.
my money. It's there.
It's
I don't
not, because it's not.
exactly. And so any entrepreneurs who's listening to this, yes, Brian is 1000% correct. Take heed that you want to put that money to the side because you don't want that to kind of like down the line become an issue. And now you're trying to catch up on taxes from past and current. You don't do it to yourself. Just do
Yeah.
it right from the beginning.
That's so good. That's so good. I love that, Amika. Okay, cool. Well, I don't want to, I want to respect your time. I really appreciate you coming on. And yeah, just huge congratulations. I know you're going to have a great year. And I don't know if you've thought about this with Strands of Faith. I mean, have you thought about selling the business? Like, have you been approached? Where are you at with that?
That is so
Because
interesting.
it's like the perfect acquisition target, right? I mean, there's interest in that brand. I'm positive.
Yeah, it is funny you say that too, because it's funny how we're talking, everything is going back to mindset, right? And what you learn across down the way. Because when I first launched, I said that I want SOF to be a legacy brand or a family brand and pass it
Mhm.
along and things like that. That was my mindset then. As I began to know and learn and understand business, um, I've began to see business in a different light, and I've started learning about acquisition and venture capitalists, all these other type of things. And so, as of right now, I can't say that that's on my radar to sell, but the exposure to it, it has kind of like, how can I say it? I've been exposed to it, so I know that that's an option. I know that I have options, and so I won't say now that I, would sell the brand, because that's not the goal at this moment. But who knows?
All right. Well,
I
we got to stay in touch. There's
yeah,
always options. You could be an outright purchase. There could be
right,
a percentage so that you can actually take some cash off the table,
right.
There's options, but I think you've got a brand that I know for sure personally, and in my network, there's people that would be interested. So,
Right. Well, I definitely want to say that when it comes to, I wish it was talked about a lot more, because from a consumer standpoint, I don't really think it's understood, like acquisitions and things like that. Because, like, I've seen in the past, people are really quick to want to cancel a brand, or to, well, cancel the founder. Once they
yeah.
sell a brand, they consider them kind of like a sellout or whatever. So I would definitely want a piece to where I'm controlling like factor, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course, of course. I mean,
But
yeah, yeah. No, there's a lot of options. The only reason I bring it up too is it's something that I think I want to start talking about more. We've been involved in acquisitions. Well, outright purchases. We've done purchases where we keep management in place, and literally we do a percentage where we have a piece of the upside. We help with the marketing and stuff to, like, with sitting on the board. There's a lot of options. So the only reason I brought it up is A, I want to start talking about it more on the show in
yeah,
general and having people
yeah,
on. And B, I was just genuinely curious because I look at your brand, and I just know in e-commerce there's a lot of consolidation happening. So there's aggregators that are going out and just, I mean, there's a lot of private equity money
mm,
that's being flooded into the market to go buy ecom brands right in the spot you're in,
right.
right in that revenue mark where it's very attractive for a lot of investors. So
Awesome.
yeah, just congratulating you on what you've built, because it's amazing. And like I said, it is sincerely awesome to have been there to see it develop. Obviously, I wasn't there at the beginning, but I got to see this like big inflection and got to be a part of it in some way. And anything that I was able to do was a blessing for me. And it's just amazing to know you, Mika. And
Thank
yeah,
you
thanks
so much.
for coming on.
Likewise, thank you so much, and just for all of your help, and being a part of this journey is greatly appreciated.
Awesome. All right. Well, have an amazing rest of your day. And yeah, talk to you guys soon.